Welcome to my hand lamination demo. This is where we're going to show the entire process of how to laminate pastry without a dough sheeter, just with a rolling pin. Stay tuned to the end of the video. We've got a advanced bicolor lamination technique to show you, and we also have a little monkey bread that we make with the trimmings. So first step here is to roll out our pastry. We're going to take our croissant dough and roll it out to 24 by 30 centimeters. We've created a butter block that measures 24 by 15 centimeters, which is exactly half the length and the same width. I use the dowel to put force pressing down the pastry just to start off the rolling process, and then I switch to this metal rolling pin, which is a bit larger and easier to roll and a bit easier on the hands as well. We're going to start from the middle and work our way down and up through the pastry to roll it out evenly, and we turn as necessary so that we can maintain the shape that we want. As you roll out, I recommend tugging on the corners of the pastry, which is going to again maintain that rectangular shape, and we want to have square edges so things line up nicely when we start locking in the butter. I still need a little bit more length here, but I'm starting to feel the pastry retract on me a little bit, so I'm going to wrap it up in parchment paper and pop it in the fridge for 15 minutes. And this is a really important step to identify in the process. You can't rush things when you're doing it by hand. It's a lot less efficient than a dough sheeter. At any point in the process, if you feel the dough fighting you, you need to cover it and put it in the fridge and let the gluten relax a little bit. So now we're starting our lock-in. This is a French lock-in method, and that consists of putting the butter block down the middle of the pastry, leaving a little gap on the top and bottom, and folding our edges in to meet as a seam in the middle. We're going to use our fingers to pinch that seam to join it into one piece of dough. The dough should feel tacky and it should stick quite easily. If it's not, you can give it a little mist with a spray bottle of water, and that will help the dough stick to itself. I'm going to use the dowel to put downward pressure along the butter, and I'm going to slowly coax it out to the top and bottom of the pastry. I'm going to press at the top and bottom of the pastry to seal the edges, and you can see I'm going cross pattern, up horizontally and then a few times vertically left and right. This is going to slowly smooth the butter out without it being too aggressive as you start rolling. Through this entire process, I recommend mentally being with the butter. Have your brain into the texture of the butter and really focus on its texture and how you're rolling it out. Pretend the dough is not even there. Don't roll out the dough, you're rolling out the butter. So make sure you're in tune with that and understand the texture of the butter throughout the whole process. So we're rolling out the pastry to a width of about 60 centimeters by 24 centimeters. It doesn't have to be exact, but this gives you a good guideline. You want a nice long pastry so that when you fold it, it's not too narrow. So now we're doing a double fold. We trim the edges so that the butter meets evenly on both sides of our cuts. And then we're going to fold 3/4 on one side, 1/4 on the other side. And then we're going to mist it with a bit of water and fold it together like a book. So again, this is a double fold, and it's also known as a book fold. After this stage, we're going to wrap it up so that the dough is sealed. I use parchment paper just to avoid using plastic, and then we're going to rest it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. So we're starting our second rollout after our dough is rested and slightly chilled, and we're going to roll it out to the same dimensions as before, so we're ready for our single fold. Again, I'll repeat myself just to reinstate the importance. If at any point in the process the dough is fighting you as you roll it out, it's important to cover it and put it in the fridge so it can relax. Now, this isn't black and white. If your butter is a bit brittle, I'm in Canada and my butter is a little bit more brittle than, say, French or other European butters, I may have to rest it for 10 or 15 minutes at room temp and maybe 10 or 15 minutes in the refrigerator, because if I put it in the refrigerator too long, the butter will get too cold and it will start to crack on me. So again, it's important to be in tune with the butter and have your mind in that spot so that you understand what the texture of the butter is going to be like, because if you roll it out and it's too cold, your butter will shatter. That's the most common pitfall or most common mistake that people make, and it's a hurdle that you have to overcome. I use some good editing to speed up this process, but throughout this rollout for my single fold, I rested the dough about twice. So I rolled it out a little bit, put it in the fridge for 15 minutes, rolled it out a bit more, and once you take it out of the fridge, again, use that rolling pin to just slowly press down some force just to get the motion into that butter and help coax it out to where you want it to go. So I've got my pastry rolled out to where I want it. I've done my single fold, which consists of trimming your edges again and then folding in like a letter. So 1/3 in and then the other third on top. So you guessed it, we're back resting our pastry. We put it in the fridge for about 30 minutes just to let that gluten relax and let the temperature cool down of the dough so we don't start proofing during the process. That's a really important step. You want to make sure your dough is cold throughout the entire process so it doesn't start to proof on you. Now at this step, I'm adding a layer of dough on top of my lamination. This is called a bicolor lamination, where you add a different dough on top of your stack. So here I've made a whole wheat dough that I'm using just to add some flavor, texture, and color into my croissants. You can totally skip this process, and I would recommend that you do skip it if you're just learning this process for the first few times. This is a bit more of an advanced technique. But in order to do it, we just mist the top of the croissant dough lamination, and we add some colored croissant dough on top of it, and we trim the edges. Simple as that. Now we're going to roll out our pastry to the size that we want for shaping. So we're looking for a width of 25 centimeters, and we're going to go as long as we can, and we're trying to get a width or a thickness of pastry of 4 to 5 millimeters. As I continue to roll up my croissant dough, I'm going to start to explain the portioning process. I start by ensuring my pastry is even and square. Then I trim off a small amount off the top and bottom edges using a ruler. This will expose the 12 layers of butter you've developed during lamination. Next, I use a bicicletta to mark my pastry width more efficiently. You can simply use a ruler, I just find this faster through the process. I'm going to mark every 9 centimeters on the bottom. At the top, I start by marking at the middle of my original markings. So that's going to be 4.5 centimeters. Then from there, continue marking every 9 centimeters. This is going to allow me to portion in the shape of an isosceles triangle. So you're going to have 2 even angles at the bottom of your pastry. This is my preference. I find this makes the pastries rise more evenly, and they rise straight as opposed to sometimes you see them rising on a bit of an angle. As I demonstrate here, cutting through the pastry with a chef's knife and a rolling pastry cutter, you can use either. It's just important to use a sharp knife as they're going to slice through the layers of the butter more evenly. My preferred croissant size is 9 centimeters by 25 centimeters with a weight of around 100 grams. Next, I'm going to mark a 1 centimeter notch in the base of each pastry. This is going to help elongate the base of the pastry, and it's going to remove a bit of density from the middle as you coil roll your croissant pastries. Once I have everything portioned, I'm going to cover them and rest them in the fridge for about 15 minutes just to relax the gluten and allow me to get a better stretch out of them when I do my final shaping. So moving on to that, we're going to take one portion and gently stretch it just to elongate it slightly and just get a bit more times around. This is a totally optional step. You don't have to do this, but I do prefer it. We're going to ensure our pastry is not dry and is slightly tacky. So you can mist with water if you need to, but if it's dry on the surface, it won't stick to itself, and that's going to cause collapse during baking. So we'll start at the base of the croissant and we'll firmly roll it straight up, nice and even, so it's the same on both sides. And you want the tail of the pastry to be underneath at the bottom. Once it is, you can give the croissant a gentle press down and create a flat side with the tail right in the bottom of the pastry. From this stage, you can pop them right in the proofer and get baking right away, or you can freeze them for later use, or you can put them in the fridge and let them rest overnight. I find maximum with my recipe is 24 hours in the fridge, and then I start to see some differences in the yeast development, but you can experiment with your recipe if you're differing from mine. Here's a little added bonus for all of you who stuck it out to the end. This is a quick little monkey bread cruffin. The great thing to do with the scraps of your pastry, don't throw them out. You can add them into your next dough, but here I chop them up. I toss them with a little bit of salt, a little bit of brown sugar, pop them in some muffin tins, and then proof and bake as you would your croissants. Super tasty. And that brings us to the end. I hope you found this demo helpful and insightful. You can stay tuned for my next video. I'm going to uncover all of my proofing and baking techniques. There's a lot to go over there, so keep an eye out for that video. And thanks for watching.